Hi, welcome to NDETV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Susan Dyer, and she's going to tell us about. Now, you had two near-death experiences?
I did. I think the first one in 2017 is more of like a classic near-death experience, and that's what I usually talk about. But yeah, I did almost die again in 2020.
Okay.
Some of us are just like that, I guess.
So feel
Uh,
free to start wherever you like.
okay. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on here. I love what you do. I love all of your programs. And um anyone who's had a spiritual experience like this, like it's such a treat to talk to them. I live in, just outside of Washington, D.C., and it's just, you know, I feel like I'm supposed to be here. I get to anchor what I hope to be inclusive and healing and uplifting energy um, into DC. But on the other hand, I really don't have many local friends, so this is like a huge treat. Um, my story is a little bit different. And if anyone has trouble or like difficulty kind of even believing what I say, I just want to say that I completely understand. And I likely would too if it wasn't my experience. So I do want to say that, like, just up front. But I was born clairvoyant, and there are different movies, different comic books. People have all sorts of ideas about what clairvoyance is. For me, it's like I'm speaking to you, but there is a sheer, it's going to sound kind of weird, but it's like a sheer neon overlay, um, almost like you would put a gel over a stage light. So there's like a sheer neon overlay, no matter what I'm doing in this dimension. And I can see energies like energetic grids. I can see other beings, angels, which I love. Um, Basically, anything that you could think of that I suppose is beyond the regular spectrum of what most people's eyesight can see. And that's unusual because it's actually like very few people are born with something as in your face as clairvoyance or clairaudience. It's very rare because it's very traumatic. So I was raised by two loving parents, but they were absolute traditional and completely baffled Catholics. I mean, so I would come running into their room every night, just crying, being like, this is what I saw tonight. Like it's a portal or these beings, or, I'd been astral traveling. Like I would fall out of my body. I mean, it was just like, and I was just always so afraid because everything was going on around me day or night. But at night, it's kind of like when you go into a movie theater and when you turn the lights down, it makes that screen all the brighter. So I got by in the daytime all right. I was still scared, but at night I really, really, I was just terrified. And my parents, who actually like, this was pretty beautiful. Uh, I'd always felt so kind of abandoned because they did they did not ever believe me, and they would say, like, you have a really overactive imagination, go back to your room. And I'd be like, but did you not hear me? Like, there are two beings by my bed. You know what I mean? And my father actually told me a couple of years ago, it's like the most honest thing he's ever told me, actually. Because they don't talk, my parents are from a generation where, like, I overshare. I think we all like know that. But he said, Susan, you really you use like what you would tell me, and like the things that you say scare me. And I was like, oh, you know, uh, oh, because I took it personally. I was like, what's wrong with me? And actually, it was my father. Um, it was his own interpretation, and he didn't know how to handle it. And he did the best he could by stamping it overactive imagination. Um, but to hear that was like, it really actually helped me reframe kind of like my own self-perception, because now it still freaks him out a little bit, but like his father, for example, who I've never met in person, like, you know, my dad will ask me, like, what does my dad have to say? And my grandpa will be like very specific. I like won't know what anything means. I'll be like, okay, and I'll just say it. So it has slowly become accepted, or I have slowly become accepted as the way I am in my family, but it took decades. And I knew that because of my church and because of my parents. And like when we're little, we don't have that many reference points. We do the best we can. So, according to the church I went to, there was one spirit. And again, I was little, and I know what all of these different things are now. But at the time, there was one spirit that was really different. And uh, it was like a crimson, like a dark red. And I could not see through it, actually. And it was really slow. And it felt like it had eyes. And it was always like 2 feet behind me every day, following me. And I did not know what it was, but because of my church, I interpreted that being to be the devil, which, by the way, I actually I am not religious at all, and I actually do not ascribe to like there being a devil at all, actually, but at the time I did. And I remember thinking, I must be really bad somehow. And I was like, I didn't know why. Like, why else would the devil be following me? Like, what did I do? And this kind of grew and calcified into this self-perception of like, I felt genuinely unlovable. Like I'm broken, something's weird. I knew by kindergarten, like never to speak of this stuff. Um, but the thing is, it's still happening. I'd be like in class and the walls would look like swimming pools. And I'm like, okay, I'm just pretending. I'm just like, do. It was so nuts. And so I never ever thought to look for help to interpret everything that I was seeing. I just did kind of like what I was supposed to. I went to college. I met a man. I knew he didn't even really like me that much, but I just felt like desperate. And I was like, well, if he's willing to marry me, I should do that because no one else will. Um, and so I essentially lived this life of fraudulence, hiding who I was until 2017. And that's when our inevitable divorce happened. And my body kind of echoed that sentiment. My body got really sick. I had chronic Lyme kind of come out of remission. And my near-death experience, I think, was actually caused by the over medication of that illness. But I had a walker. There were weeks when I couldn't even use a walker. I would like army crawl on the floor with my kids. And, you know, at my worst point, I was like making them peanut butter and jelly sandwiches while laying on the floor. And I would like line them up on paper plates along the wall so they could, you know, come and go and be fed, almost like you would do for like a pet. You know, I just like I couldn't function. And my friends were like, "You are dying." And I was like, "I'm not dying. No, you know, like I was like determined. I was like, I'm gonna try everything possible." But then that one night, and it was actually no coincidence, there's this period in the summer called the Lion's Gate, where this planet Sirius, which is like one of the most beautiful planets, like has great ties to ancient Egypt and the cosmic sun and everything. But there's a great portal every August. And one of those nights I was on the couch and it was really calm. I was like, oh, I'm going to die tonight. I was like, just like it's tonight. And I tried everything so thoroughly that I actually was relieved and so calm and elated, actually. However, I had to like wait my friends out. They would not go home. And I just wanted them to leave. My kids were with their dad, and I was like, please let me go. Like my right hand was paralyzed. My right foot was paralyzed. I was like cranking bags and bags of antibiotics into me every day. Like I really was like a husk, you know, and I felt no guilt. I was like, I have tried everything, and I can't figure out how to get better. And so when I was crawling upstairs that night, my guides interrupted with they like spitballed this at me. I literally felt like they were like, I felt like it was like they like had a straw and they like like a spitball hit me on the head, and they were like, you have one more chance. And I was like, what? Because I was like on all fours on the stairs, and I was like, what are you talking about? And they were like, you have to get out of your body tonight and find help. And I stopped crawling, and I was like, oh, you know, because I've been astral traveling like forever. But I said, I was like, wait, yeah, but I don't know how to do it on command. I'd never done it on command. I'd always just kind of like rolled out and had fun, and so I said that, and they were like, it's okay, it's okay. So I just kept climbing, and as I was climbing up my bench into the bed, they told me exactly what to do so that I could do that. And they said, you know, lay on your side along like the exact edge. Like truly, I was like, am I gonna fall on my face? Like, is this gonna work? They had me lay on the exact edge of the bed. And there is a point in sleep, I think it's called like hypnagogic. There's like a tipping point where essentially like we have one foot in spirit and one foot in this dimension. We're like kind of half and half, if you will. And it's at that tipping point where I was meant to roll off the bed and out of my body. I was willing to do this, of course, I would have done anything. I did not want to leave anything on the table, but I was terrified. Terrified. It's one thing when you're astral traveling and you're just having fun and you're learning things and you're being trained and like by your guides and but I was like, well, what do I do? Like am I just gonna like be there? What like so it's funny. I didn't know what to expect. And I was really afraid. But the cool thing was when I rolled out, I didn't have to do anything. My higher self, like most of us, at least this is how I see it. My name's Susan right now for this little portion of time, but 99% of me, is anchored in the real world, the world of spirit. And my higher self, or the bulk of me that's far more wise than Susan, handled it for me. So I rolled out, and immediately right next to my head it wasn't a portal, actually. It looked like a subway tube, like a lightning fast traveling tube tunnel. And in that moment, I actually had a cool recognition, because I remember being young, and where my headboard would be, sometimes I would be like, oh my God, there'd be like a huge swirling portal. And I was always so afraid of like what was going to come out of that. And I realized in that moment, I'm like, oh, I made those portals. Like that was for me, like to get out. And but this is interesting. This tube was so ugly. I was like, wait, what? Because like all my portals and the angels and like the energy grids, like, they are the most like gem colored, rich, like just like a vibrance that is like, I guess like the closest thing to the vibrance of these colors of everything would be like Italian blown glass, where it's just like so vivid and rich. And then I get out of my body and there's this ugly black and like charcoal gray tube. And I was like, I had what? I was like, that? I was expecting like, I'm like, isn't there supposed to be like a light? Like, what is that? That looks like really terrible. It looks like a dirty pipe or something, but so I was like, but I had no choice. I was like, okay. So I kind of like angled actually, I don't think this was my astral. Sorry, those are my neighbors. It's the weekend. But I usually say this is my astral body. And now I think about it and I'm like, that wasn't like, I think that these near-death experiences actually almost like pulling out a kaleidoscope. I think these events happen with our finer emotional bodies, or our finer energetic bodies, even of a higher quality than our astral bodies, And so I got into this tube. I didn't know where it was taking me. There was no one else in there. There was no music of the spheres. I was just like, okay, what? And then boom, I was in what a lot of people call the void. And being so afraid of the dark at the time, I just completely panicked. And of course, like I like went straight to thinking like, oh my God, did I do something bad? Like, because it was dark. It was so dark. No light, no sound, no essence. But I know now what what my higher self actually did was connect me straight back into the womb. That that void is almost like the divine feminine half of a yin yang. Like I kind of see it like as a father and a mother God. And that space, that darkness is like where Father God, like the young, the young energy is going to next manifest, you know, it's like the next blank canvas. And so I was floating there, and I didn't know that at the time. And so I just said really quickly, God, please take me somewhere safe and good. And, you know, for those of you, I'm sure you've heard this, there is no linear time in these higher dimensions. It's actually quicker. You know, communication and travel is actually quicker than it takes to have the thought. It is literally instantaneous. So, you know, that was technically the thought that I said. But, you know, before I was done with my first syllable, I was immediately like a tea bag almost, just like floating in what presented as these blazing, beautiful golden rays. And that to me, I knew immediately that was the unnameable God, source, you know, whatever your word is for it. But I was like, okay. And we had a very intimate exchange. No speaking, not with anyone. You know, it's just all instant, you know, telepathic, I guess you would say. But God, and I say God honestly because I'm just lazy and I've always said it, but so God's first question was, do you want to stay here, or, you know, do you want to go back? And that was really important because I felt like my children, their father and I are so different, and I knew that their development really needed to have the balance of my qualities in addition to their dad's qualities. And so because I was still scared, I was worried God was not going to believe me. Like, you know, because I was like, no, 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 I want to go back. I want to go back. And so I projected like an IMAX sized photo of my children. And I was like, that's not enough. That's not enough. And we actually have like hundreds of chakras and many different kind of energetic ley lines running through us. I think a lot of people have heard the term silver cord, where it's almost like, you know, almost like that's what severs when you die and you don't return. But that's not all. Like we have a horror line, like, you know, there's so much energy in so many different formations all around us and even within our own light bodies. It's like incredible. It's really amazing. But so I was worried. I was like, okay, I'm going to show God that I'm serious. So I started like hand over hand yanking, like pulling on my silver cord, like to show like I really mean it. And I remember thinking, I was like, where are we? Like, how long? Like, I could be doing this for like 5 years and like still not get back to like where, like, you know what I mean? I was like, this is ridiculous. And so he like stopped me from that, and then we had this exchange. And before this near-death experience, and I think this is so beautiful, I really want to say this, like really important. I'd always like loved God, but you know, and I'd been meditating at that point for like 15 or 20 years. But I kind of thought of God as like a loving but vague force, like a loving but vague creative force. And when we were having that exchange, I was like, he knew me better than my best friend. And that's where some of my convictions came from. Because during that time, I realized that there's no separation. Like it was like almost like a plug plugging into a wall socket. Like I am not a daughter of God. I'm an extension, like we are one. And everything, even this like dirty tissue is God. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's only one cosmic energy by whatever name. And I also had the thought in that moment, and this is probably more controversial. And I get a lot of I get a lot of cranky comments about this, but I word for word am so blessed to remember this thought. I remember thinking I could have just murdered 10 people right now, and I would be greeted in this very same way. Like God is just God, like a radio station, one radio station, you know? It's hard to explain, but if you were to cut a brick in half, there's just brick, you know? And I was like, that's God. Now, we down here, everything's kind of like relational, and we get our feelings hurt, and love is a pretty complex idea down here, but not when it comes to that pure energy. There's nothing more simple. And it reminded me, my meditation teacher has a story about like, just like a tree, a big leafy tree, and in the middle of a clearing, if Jeffrey Dahmer walked up to that tree, the tree would not pass judgment and then like pull its branches back, in the same way that like if Mother Teresa walked under the tree for that shade, the tree would not like fluff itself up, the tree's just one way. It's just a tree. And so we continued having this exchange, and I guess the most specific quote that I promised was like my worst fear come true. I did promise God directly that I would return to earth, come out of the spiritual closet, and quote, live transparently. And that was terrifying to me because, I guess, the things I've seen and the places I've been and the different species of intelligent life that I have relationships with, like it's really hard to like kind of wrap your mind around if that's not your experience. And especially living in DC, I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm about to say all of this. Like this is like not the city to be like, hey, did you know one of my guides is a mantis being? It's like, this is not, it's like, this is DC. It's like, you're like risque if you're wearing navy blue. So, I also knew I had to tell my parents, and I had to do that very thoughtfully. And I was really afraid I was going to lose my relationship with my dad. But before that happened, God passed me over to Jesus. And I was like, Jesus, because, I've had so many weird experiences. I'd kind of closed off to the Bible. And then all of a sudden there was this like, I felt like it was like the rich white people's version of Jesus. I was like, what? I'm like, I know you didn't look like that. He had like light brown hair and like big blue eyes and like this like very clean cream robe. And I was like, come on. But like, I guess like whenever I've had to meet beings like that, they present themselves in a way where I will understand immediately who they are. And I was like, okay, Jesus, that's so weird. And he kind of held his palms out like this. Um, and he just asked me, he was like, do you want to get better? And I was like, yes. And I grabbed his hands and we went flying through all of these gorgeous shades of green. Green is traditionally um, the color of the heart chakra, and Archangel Raphael, who is like the healing archangel. I say traditionally because like honestly, people have all different kinds of colored chakras. Like my root chakra is metal colored. But we did that together. And then he said, is there anywhere else you'd like to go? And I was like, yeah, because I've had this one lifelong guide. I call him Perry. And I've always known that he um, was not embodied. But I knew that if I could meet with him on this ship, that he would be able to present in a form like that was physical, that like I could hug him. And so boom, we're there. We're like floating alongside this ship, and kind of like the Middle Ages, where like they would have a crest on the shield. Next to this hull door was a panel of etched symbology. I'd always heard like math was the universal language, and I'm like, I don't know. I think it's symbology. Like it, it was like this, kind of detailed shapes, but I was able to read them like I was reading the newspaper. And I was like, yeah, this is the right ship. This is the right ship. And I immediately, boom, was inside. And of course, that scene was created for my comfort and understanding. So it looked like I was in the 1950s NASA gift shop. And then I could see over there, I was like kind of getting my bearings. I'm like, okay, where am I? And then I was like, oh, there's Perry. And I knew it was Perry because like I knew it was like from the neck down, it was like my dad, like down to the brand of shoes. You know what I mean? But then like his head was like another middle-aged white man. And I was like, oh my God, that's Perry. That's Perry. And he totally like took the dad look. And I was waiting. Perry was talking to some other person. And I was like, really? I'm like, I don't know how much time I have here, people. And I remember being kind of like, can you get out of the way? I got some things to do. And but that person or being left, and I just like went running up to him and just like grabbed him in the biggest hug. Um, and then we kind of had a kind of brief conversation. And then I came to the next morning. And so my walker was downstairs, but my cane was laying against my nightstand. And I like sat right up and I looked at my cane and I was like, I'm never gonna need that again. And I haven't. And I was healed. And my blood, for example, they were about to start chelating my blood. It was so iron laden. And my hematologist was like, what is going on? Because I had an appointment with him soon thereafter. And he was like, your blood is 100% clean. And sometimes I get a little feisty, and I kind of messed with him. I was like, well, if you really want to know, and I was like, I had a near-death experience, and yeah, anyway, he was like, he did not. It was pretty cool. I guess the little things. I'm like, it was cool. He did not know what to say. He was like, okay. I'm like, I haven't seen him since. And then just like you, like I spent the next 7 days just like writing. I just like did not want to forget anything, you know? Um, and I have been blessed. Like, God has shown me the way, because I was like, I am all in. I am like yours. Use me up, but I don't know like what for. You're gonna have to show me, and he has so far. Whatever. And I also was like very careful to speak to my parents about it too. I actually took a business class before bringing this up to my parents, because I knew it was really going to upset them. They did not want me on YouTube speaking about extraterrestrials any more than I did. Um, but it's been all right. And I know my father is still afraid of death, but I also know like he will ask me, things, and that I have no way of answering, and I know he believes, and I don't think he's comfortable with it, but we are still intact as a family. And I just want to offer women a safe haven where I'm like, you cannot weird me out. I have seen it all. I've been through it all. I was once like taken hostage by a Christian fundamentalist horse wrangler. It's like, I'm like, you cannot weird me out. And most people today are awakening in a more natural way, where it's not like from the top down. It's more like as they become more centered in themselves, they begin awakening, kind of like from the bottom up, like maybe like from clairsentience, clear feeling, and kind of going from there. It's a much more natural and comfortable process than like being born and just like living in a screensaver. You know what I mean? Um, and that's what I do. I'm like, if I could do two things, it would be to comfort any woman who is struggling in any way about this, and also, if possible, do anything to erase the concept that God is a presence to be feared at all. I would love that to be like a part of my legacy, just to be like, there is nothing else except for love.
Was your experience in 2020 a lot different?
It was a lot more cut and dry, because my symptoms were really, my brain would shut down and I would just collapse. And I was not safe with my kids. My parents had to come up, and for that I was meditating, and I said, God, I was like, look, I really need to ask you. I'm like, I really need some non-Confucius answers right now. I'm like, can you please just tell me, like, how much longer how much longer do I need to stay in the game here until things turn around? And I remember I was like crying because like it was like the first time it was just God was like, give me 60 days. And I was like, oh my God, it was like, okay, thank you, thank you. It's just like finally, like not like some like, symbolic like metaphor. I'm like, all right. So I marked it on my calendar. I was like, thank God. And and then he was like, give me 60 days. And God did not need 60 days. I needed 60 days to release my level of fear enough for God and my higher self to really get in there. But he said, give me 60 days, and then you need to golden key, which is a term from the spiritual teacher Emmett Fox. He's like, you need to golden key like your life depends on it. And that means whenever my thoughts turned to fear of death, which was constant, I would immediately try to catch myself and turn my thoughts to God. And that was such a grueling mental discipline because I was so afraid and getting worse every day. At one point, I was like 2 weeks out, and I was like, God, you are going to have to like pull a Tyrannosaurus Rex out of my what. I'm like, I am barely alive. And we were like 2 weeks out. And that night, actually, I was like on the couch, and Judy Garland is one of my guides, and she came like flying in, sat on the couch, and was like, Susan, you are not golden king, like your life depends on it. And I was like, what? And I kind of like realized, oh my God, she's right. Like I would entertain that fear for however long and then be like, oh yeah, turn my thoughts to God. So thank you, Judy. But so that really helped. And then we were down to 4 days, and I was like, I mean, my parents thought I was going to die too. So 4 days out, everything turned around. Yeah. He really, I guess, wanted to like up the suspense on that one.
So 4 days left out of the 60?
Yeah. And I've had, and we've talked about this, but like trauma and, whether it be emotional or physical, and, autoimmune illness or illness of any kind. Like, I feel like for people who are sensitive, it's very common. I think that we are more used to inhabiting our light bodies than being, so physically enclosed, in this kind of a body. It does not feel as natural for us. And I think it's just like a theory, but I feel like that could be why so many of us have difficulty with our health. Yeah.
So you wrote a book. Is it out?
Oh, I hope so, but no, it's not. I have
Okay.
I wrote um about a bit about my near-death experience, but more so about this process that brings women through their chakras. And like every chakra is kind of connected to different areas of your life. And I kind of developed like these exercises to really kind of cleanse yourself from the inside out, kind of making sure that you are living authentically and that you are facing and resolving any kind of negativity that may be distorting the way you divinely receive. You know, it's so easy in the moment to just kind of suppress something rather than address it. But in the long term, it's like we are divine instruments, and the clearer we are emotionally, from the inside out, and the more authentic we live our lives, that's ensuring the purest kind of divine reception we can receive. So my agent is trying to sell it right now, and I'm just kind of waiting and trying not to check my email too much. But yeah,
Well, let me know when it's out, and
yeah,
I'll add a link to your book in your
thank you.
description.
Thank
So
you.
I appreciate you coming on. That's quite
Yeah,
unique experience.
I loved your story too. And I just want to like hug you. I feel like anyone, you know, who puts themselves out there in this way is just so beautiful. I mean it because it does feel like a little bit of a risk, you know? It's not mainstream, you know? Um and so like I really appreciate everything that you're doing. And I really, you know, admire and respect you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. And I'll send this to you as soon as it's available. Should be later tonight.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay. All right. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.